Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here for the last the last day of the last Monday. See me a chip on the last Monday in a May for this year. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is well. Hope everybody is doing good. If you're in the Eastern Caribbean, you're celebrating with Monday. And if you're in the American Caribbean or in the Americas, then you're celebrating President's Day. So bless up everybody on their holiday today. I'm gonna start out this evening before we get into the variety of topics that we're gonna speak about with a small quote. As you know, the purpose of the show is to inform, give you different perspectives, different weapons to use in your quiver. You know what I'm saying? Help you see things a little different, give you more options. Uh, Even before I get to that, I would like to thank everybody who has been liking, subscribing, interacting with the page, regardless of the show. If it's just interacting with pictures and so, all of that is important as every one of your interaction help the algorithm to say, but let me push the real entertainment network a little bit more, so we can get anywhere without your support. And for that, there is much thanks. Okay, enough of the yapping. Let me get into the quote and then I have a little one or two observations and then we're going to get towards the videos. All political orders come to an end eventually. They are based upon the material conditions that give rise to them in the first place. They are either replaced by a new political order that communicates a coherent message to the population, or there begins a protracted period of instability and chaos until a new order emerges. Um, I say that because I've been making some observations. I've been making some observations about the Labour Party, about various parties, and this quote, come from a wiser person than myself. I try to read, try to inform myself, and they would also observe every political order comes to an end. So when I'm speaking about labor, possibly losing its direction, I'm speaking because I'm looking at the history of labor. I'm seeing how labor has come from a working class party to now labor is all about the elites. And not just all about the elites, all about elites who seemingly do not intend to give up power. So I will leave labor there. And I'm gonna head straight to Pam, the SK. I don't know if anybody would have listened. Sean Richards recently did an interview. I think it may have been 2 weeks ago now, something like that. Couple days, within 10 days of the interview. I do not have any clips of the interview. However, in my observation, Sean Richards did some harm to the People's Action Movement. Couple of observations are, for example, he has said that he can give up his green card. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, but well, to a point. By Sean Richards immediately obtaining his green card upon leaving office, it shows you that Sean Richards does not feel like there is enough opportunity in St. Christopher and Nevis for himself to survive. to get the money that he need to move around, the opportunity is greater in the United States. And so therefore he has chosen to, get his green card. And as he said, he's not gonna give up that. He ain't gonna take the food out that he want. And he doesn't, by saying that, he's also saying he not see how he could be putting enough food in him out in in sinkers. And so he see opportunities outside. I feel like that is gonna be a very difficult thing. I don't know how the voters in Sinkits are gonna take that. But certainly the Labour Party will attempt to imply that in some fashion that is gonna hurt him at the next election. We shall see how that goes. The other issue that I'm kind of confused about with Mr. Richards is I checked it out, and he is indeed correct that y- having a green card does not say it does not disqualify you from being a parliamentarian. However, it does make it difficult for you to do your job because as a green card holder, which he would have explained, he has to reside in the United States, which leads back to the first point. He's residing right now outside of not just his constituency. We have become accustomed right now to politicians not residing in their constituency, which I personally feel like is stupidness. If I am going to represent you, if I am going to vote for you, you should certainly live within the constituency. I don't want to hear about your historical links. People are getting upset over overseas voters when the politician who they're voting for does not even live in their constituency. I see a bigger problem with that. Let we keep it consistent. Let the leaders at the top show us the way to go. And if they are not gonna do that, well, the little ones shall lead them. Anyway, that's all I got for Mr. Richards and the PAM. The final observation I have, and I also do not have any videos of this, but I would direct you to the Real Entertainment Network social media pages, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, and there is a video circulating. And this video was taken of some workers at the orchard down at Indian Castle, and they were basically in the grounds racing their vehicle, kicking up dust, and it was basically nonsense. Everything that was happening, it looked like nobody is in charge of that facility. I saw more dust than coconut trees down there. I saw more dust than pepper. I saw more dust than any other uh, trees produce down there. This is in the constituency of my teammate, Mr. Eric Evelyn, Alabia Empire Man. And he's also the minister responsible for agriculture. My greatest issue, I think that, and we're gonna get into this with one of my topics for this evening, which will be the mandate of heaven. But if you are a minister and your greatest attribute is the fact that you're a cheerleader, you could tell everybody, hey, we're gonna get it going. You know what I'm saying? I feel good, them kind of thing then. That does not translate into the real world. In a translate in a cricket, sports, in a translate in a business. You as a cheerleader, if that is your ultimate attribute, ain't saying nothing. And what you will find under these circumstances is chaos. You will find malfunction not function, malfunction. Good night, honey. And so when you see this video, at the end of the video, the person stop record as soon as they get in an accident with the other vehicle that is down in the orchard. This has to be the height of nonsense. I cannot believe. Let me come back to the media again. How is the media seeing this video and not going and finding out what is happening? Who got into the accident? Who's in charge? Who's responsible for the damage that was done? Indeed, honey, I brought up the fact that i- in the Americas celebrating Memorial Day. It's a holiday all over. With Monday in the Eastern Caribbean and President's Day in the Americas. Hey, Ginger? But I was totally lie on. I have the sneaking suspicion that while I'm on here, Ginger's gonna get babies. I could be wrong, but maybe I gonna see something amazing tonight. Cause Ginger is with Childs. So we're gonna see what is taking place. The show's not gonna stop. You could believe that, but we're gonna take it as it goes with regards to that. Back down to the Indian Cancer Orchard. Think it is incumbent on the media to get these things out there. Don't just left this thing as we see a video. We would like the story. Who is responsible? Because I'm telling you, there's supposed to be some kind of suspension. And this is also what I mean when I'm saying when you look at when citizens look at these type of responsibility, this is where we have to this is where it's not Memorial Day, honey. You send me some text about President Day. Did I say President Day? I apologize if I said President's Day, but it's Memorial Day. So yeah, I apologize if I made an error in judgment, but it is Memorial Day in May. So um, as I say, back to Indian Castle. Somebody has to take some responsibility. Somebody has to be steering the boat. There got to be some suspension. There got to be some firing. Something like we need to hear more about what is happening. This is unacceptable. Especially, we have gone from the Archard was actually a part of Culture Armor 50. For sure. For sure, they only show us the very basic part of the Archard. But now you cannot see any images or anything down there. 40 acres of land was cleared because they said that the Archard is so successful, and you better believe all the 40 acres of land, bush don't go back. Fresh bush. So that's the situation there. We need to see better and do better in my estimation. This first video that I'm gonna do, I thought that this was appropriate. The focus is gonna be on ladies, but I do believe that we are gonna witness our first AI, A- AI slap, our first AI slap, not SLAP, like when pig in a mud, slappy. Yeah, we are gonna get our first AI slap election coming soon. I have seen images of the premiere. No gray hair, no dribbling at all. No titty. I've seen other images of persons, so I know that there is some experimentation going on the consensus movement side. Certainly, in Syncits on the labor side, I have also seen some AI slap being generated. So I thought that this was important. Honey, I already tried to correct the mistake. If I said President's Day, I meant Memorial Day. I am sorry. I got mixed up with my American holidays, okay? But we're gonna look at the first video concerning AI in elections. So let me see how this goes.
AI deepfakes are spreading fast. Online sexual exploitation is increasing.
Deepfakes are life-ruining, career-ruining, relationship-ruining, and, their impact.
No, I'm not hearing anything from this lady. Okay, let's see what the problem is. Give me a moment. Ginger.
AI deepfakes.
Still no vibes. Cuba minority mandate Ebola.
Are spreading fast. Online sexual exploitation is increasing.
Deepfakes are life-ruining, career-ruining, relationship-ruining, and, they're impacting our democracy at a rising rate.
I was depressed. I was shattered when, it came into my knowledge.
Female politicians are increasingly being targeted with sexualized AI-generated content. Basically, their faces are copy-pasted into pornography or AI-generated sexualized images or videos. And science shows, violence against women online discourages women from taking part in political life. In early May, Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, made her case public. This sexualized fake image of her went viral. But it's AI, and she's not the only female politician targeted. Kamala Harris, Claudia Sheinbaum, Ursula von der Leyen, Asma Bukhari. We found sexualized deepfakes and sexualized AI images of these leaders and many, many more worldwide. On porn websites, but also on platforms such as Facebook and X.
This is abusive content that is made without women's consent. And many victims I've spoken to do not like that term, deepfake pornography, because it minimizes the harmful nature of the material.
It is especially harmful not only for these individuals, but also for democracy itself, because the dissemination of these kinds of pictures is meant to degrade them and also to delegitimize their political standing.
Women are underrepresented in politics worldwide. The most powerful politicians in the world have almost always been men. As social media becomes more and more vital for politicians, hate speech against public figures is also increasing. Both male and female politicians face hate speech online, but women are disproportionately bombarded with sexist or sexualized comments. A study from 2024 shows 35,545 pieces of sexualized deepfake content featuring 26 members of the US Congress. All but one were female. There was no significant association between a political party and sexualized deepfake content, though. Sexualized deepfakes may be a systemic problem, but women who are targeted suffer individually as well. Kara Hunter, member of the Legislative Assembly of Northern Ireland, remembers the moment when she first found out about fake sexualized content of herself online.
I just remember I felt like a hot rush of heat sort of go through my body, just of complete, fear and anxiety of what was to come.
I just want to pause and say, this is particularly something that could have a disproportionate impact on women, and this could be a way to try to run women away from politics. So I gotta be aware of this situation. But I do not think that the upcoming election is gonna merely target women. I feel like, as I said, we are about to see our first AI election, so we go kind of pay attention. That's why I brought this to your attention, so you could be aware.
Next, I was stopped on the street and asked for a sexual favour from a strange man I'd never met. And that shows you the extent of how online harms become real-life harms.
In Pakistan, sexualized AI content can be especially damaging for women.
It's usually character assassination and sexualized innuendos, images, and videos that are produced to target her. And obviously that feeds into a whole misogynist culture of impunity.
One example, in 2024, Punjab Information Minister Asma Bukhari said she was targeted through a sexually explicit deepfake. She later spoke publicly about how distressing it was. We also found other examples involving Punjab Chief Minister Mariam Nawaz. One manipulated image falsely showed her hugging a male political leader. Her name and likeness were also used on an AI platform where chatbot persona included explicit sexualized descriptions and tags. These are not all deepfakes in the strict technical sense, but they point to the same problem. AI tools are being used to sexualize female politicians, damage their reputations, and intimidate them away from public life. A huge problem, most of the countries worldwide lack strong legislation when it comes to sexualized deepfakes. Most revenge porn or image-based abuse laws were created before deepfakes existed.
A few years ago, it was very hard and only experts could create them. And today you can buy the software online for a few dollars, and then anybody can use it. You don't need any machine learning knowledge to do it.
And the laws, if there are any, differ from country to country.
And that is also one of the reasons why it's gonna be more prevalent. You do not have to have the expertise that you needed to have to create this type of content. Hence why people who are not even savvy with electronics in politics, I have seen already the sampling, I see the experimentation, and I'm just trying to prepare both participants and the general public. There's gonna be some AI out there. It's gonna be harder to discern what is real and what is fake. So you go, keep an eye on your head.
Country and region to region. Let's have a look at 3 jurisdictions: the EU, Pakistan, and the US. The European Union is planning a stricter policy when it comes to deepfakes. In May 2026, they agreed to prohibit AI applications to create unauthorized sexually explicit deepfakes, as well as the creation of child sexual abuse. Companies will have until December 2nd this year to bring the systems in line. The policy is moving forward, but hasn't been approved yet. Pakistan still does not have a law that specifically deals with AI or sexualized deepfakes.
We have the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act 2016, which makes it an offense to superimpose photographs of anybody and intentionally and publicly exhibit or display any information which goes against their modesty. We also have section 499 of the Pakistan Penal Code, which makes it an offense to defame someone.
And what about the US? There, it's illegal to share online non-consensual explicit images, real or AI generated or manipulated. And the Take It Down Act requires platform removal within 48 hours after someone flags the abuse. But in all 3 places, the EU, Pakistan, and the US, one challenge remains.
A real problem with sexual deepfakes is finding out who has produced or shared these images without your consent, because often these people are anonymous. And the platforms, particularly a platform like X, is very reluctant to ever give any information to law enforcement to be able to take prosecutions against that person.
So, sexualized deepfakes can seriously do harm, especially against women and female politicians. If you see this type of content online, you can report it.
And when it comes to what social media platforms can do to come up with more robust mechanisms to protect individuals, is number one, they should follow the US's Take It Down Act policy worldwide.
Sexualized deepfakes are not just online harassment. For women in politics, they have become a tool for humiliation, intimidation, and silencing. And for the women targeted, the impact often continues long after the images are removed.
So This is something to pay attention to. I've been trying to speak about AI because there is a lot of benefits that we could derive from it, but there are also some issues that we may have to deal with along the way. So be aware. You hear me predict it right now. This is gonna be the first AI election. Money that is not being spent on them big boards, them maybe 2x4, whatever the boards that they put on the side of the road. My mind scramble, I can't even call them. But money that was gonna be spent on that and all kind of other thing, everybody is AI. I think there's gonna be an AI election, and we shall see. But that is my perspective right now. One of the things that we have lived through quite recently, and one of the big dangers that's gonna be facing us going forward, is pandemics. And if you are not aware, there is an Ebola outbreak currently going on, and some of the nations where the Ebola outbreak is happening are actually going to be traveling to the United States, so it could be a real big problem. So this next video is about Ebola. We're going to look at two videos actually about Ebola, so you could have an idea of what is going on at this time.
Experts from the World Health Organization have arrived in the Democratic Republic of Congo with supplies to fight the Ebola outbreak. Nearly 100 people are thought to have died from the highly contagious disease. The outbreak is centered in northeastern Ituri province, a remote region that's grappling with a humanitarian crisis. 2 cases have now been confirmed in neighboring Uganda as well. Rwanda has closed its land border with the DRC. The World Health Organization has declared a public health emergency of international concern.
Medical experts and supplies arrive at the epicenter of the Ebola outbreak. Authorities and aid agencies are intensifying their efforts to contain the virus in.
Oh yeah, I was asked to share the video of the accident, so I put it in the Facebook chat. I'm about to put it in the YouTube chat as we speak. So just now I'm gonna put it in the YouTube chat. So anybody need to see the video of the accident down at the orchard, the foolishness that has been happening at the orchard, unreported, you will be able to see, Charles.
Ituri, a densely populated region. Congo's health minister issued this appeal to the public.
Make yourself known so that you can be taken care of and so that we can prevent the disease from spreading. That is really the message. Treatment is free. Come and get treated.
The first case has been confirmed in Goma, eastern Congo's largest city. The gold mining region is rife with violence and was seized by rebels in January. The outbreak is adding to the fear and insecurity.
I'm calling on local authorities to intervene. We're really scared because of the war and now because of Ebola. We're really scared.
I'm afraid, like any human being, because you know we have children at school and they still come into contact with a lot of people, and we don't really know who they might be around or play with. Once they come home, they can infect the whole family.
Authorities in Goma say response teams are in place as they try to reassure the public. But one of the scientists who co-discovered the Ebola virus nearly 50 years ago says the country is susceptible to outbreaks.
Our ecosystem is favorable to the development of all sorts of pathogens. The problem is the weakness of surveillance. Our system is very poor at detecting an outbreak.
Experts say the virus's spread is being fueled by displaced people fleeing war and a decline in international funding, which has weakened detection. The current outbreak is caused by the rare Bundibugyo strain, which has no approved treatment or vaccine. The World Health Organization is calling for international cooperation to contain the outbreak.
Let's get more on this now with Professor Oyewale Tamori. He's a regional virologist for Africa in Ibadan, Nigeria. Professor, thanks for being with us. How worried are you about this current Ebola outbreak?
I'm very worried. I'm really very worried. Yeah, because the surveillance we're really, nobody knows exactly the total amount of cases. We're talking about 300, but I'm sure there are more than that. The surveillance is poor, just like Muyembe said, and that's where the problem is. We don't even know where it is now. It's very
One of the reasons why the surveillance is poor is because the cutting of USAID, and this is not just a US thing. Europe, for example, Britain used to spend 600 million on helping African countries with their help thing. That has been cut to 200 million. So, as I'm saying, please pay attention. It seems like it's far from you, but you could, even when you think about the fact that there is a new route between Barbados and Africa. I think a plane landed from Nigeria yesterday or the day before. It is closer to you than you think. So just pay attention. I'm not saying that you could necessarily do anything about it. But you definitely can't do anything unless you become aware of the situation, because this is when now you're gonna be able to fight back and take the proper precautions.
already in Goma, it's going to Kinshasa itself. Uganda has also reported in Kampala. So we don't know where next. So everybody's scared.
So you're saying there are probably more cases than they've detected so far. It's thought the virus may have been spreading already for weeks before it was detected. Based on what you know about this outbreak, how far do you think it could have spread?
You see, when you remember that the first case was actually way back in April 25, almost 3-4 weeks ago, the lab did not detect it until almost under 2 weeks, which is May 15. By that time, nobody knows where those were. You can't even begin to talk about contact tracing, because this will have been infected since April. Where are they? Where are they gone to? Nobody knows. Now, you remember that's a conflict area with all the problems that we have in the place there.
This strain of Ebola has no approved therapeutics or vaccines, as we saw in our report just now. How does that complicate the response in trying to address this health emergency?
I think even where the vaccine is available, delivery is a major problem. Not to talk about when there's no vaccine at all. So we have to go back on all those simple techniques of IPC, infection, prevention, and control. But when you don't even know where the disease is, it makes it more complicated. So that's when we say we are scared, just like the people there said, everybody. But we shouldn't panic. It's to make advantage of what we have and start working on that. Already, I think the African Center for Disease Control and the concerned African governments are already taking action.
So it's important not to panic, as you say, but funerals and the movement of people are fueling the spread. With that in mind, what would be the most effective measures to bring this outbreak under control?
Remember, during the Kikwit epidemic in those days, there was what we call safe burial. We have to go back to that. The idea of families gathering to bury their friends, it should not be allowed. The same problem also occurred in in Ebola in 2014 in West Africa. So we have to go back to those infectious prevention control, safe burial. Only those who have anything to do, who are protected, should be involved with the burial. It should not be a family thing. And then for now, we should stop all those family activities that could lead to the spread of the virus.
given what you know about the capabilities of the health authorities in the regions there to address things like this, do you think there are sufficient resources on the ground in the affected region to contain the spread?
We're getting international help becomes important. Again, I think I want to go back to where we have our strength, which is the preparedness. We have so many epidemics. DR Congo has had 17 episodes of this disease, but now we should know that they should be aware of what is going on. To have to wait for 3 weeks before you make a diagnosis, something is wrong with our preparedness, and that's why we need to put our money. The simple issue of surveillance and all that is probably cheaper than having to get people to come in drugs and all that kind of thing. So Africa should refocus itself on the issue of preparedness, improve surveillance, so that we can prevent most of these outbreaks.
As you know,
I would assume that, as usual, anytime the Prime Minister hears about anything, he says, we're seriously giving it a look. If you realize Antigua has already taken action. Oh yes, and by the way, good night. Antigua has already taken action. I think that they are doing thermal imaging. So if you come in hot, then you may have to do some kind of secondary testing. As the doctor is saying, just like a doctor, Joe, he does not have a monopoly on common sense. And as long as we are able to understand other people, we will be able to see what is taking place and understand the things that we can do, the preventative measures that we could take. And one of the things he seems to be saying here, we go start with monitoring. So it's going to be important to look and hear what the officials are doing at this time.
The security situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, particularly in the east of the country where this outbreak is centered, that security situation is very precarious. There's civil war going on there, different kinds of conflict. That must make containment and treatment measures more difficult, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, so we have two security issues. We are combating with the physical security. We're also combating with the insecurity of the virus itself. But meanwhile, remember where Ituri is. It's actually at the corner between Uganda and Southern Sudan. Nobody's even talking about Southern Sudan now because of the insecurity. Can't even get there. So who knows what is going on there? And these are contiguous areas. Remember what happened in Gedeku in 2014 when we had these three countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and others, getting themselves, So we maybe have the same kind of situation, but we can't even get there to find out what is happening, which makes it even more complicated.
Are you confident, Professor, that the international community will mobilize enough support to deal with this international emergency now?
Sooner or later, we better do, and the earlier the better. Otherwise, the world will be at this problem. Again, I keep reminding you of what happened in 2014 in West Africa and became a major pandemic issue. So the same thing is happening now. And I think the earlier the international support comes in, the better for everybody and the countries themselves to come out and make sure that they put in all their resources into combating this outbreak.
And finally, Professor, just briefly, do you think that we could see cases of this outbreak, this particular strain, outside of Africa?
Why not? Why not? I mean, it started from where it was. They got it in Kampala now. They got a case in Goma, I'm told. There's in Kinshasa. So the world is at the beck and call of this Ebola virus. So the world better prepare.
Professor, thank you very much for talking with us today. That was Virolo.
Ginger, you gotta relax, honey. Hey, Juno. We gotta find a better way to do this. But anyway, as he was just asked on the possibility of this leaving Africa. And I mentioned to you that this summer is the World Cup. Actually, next month is the World Cup. And there are African countries, I think Angola is actually coming to the United States. So and we just live in a global world, so it's not realistic or reasonable to think that you are gonna be safe just because you're in the Caribbean and this is happening in Africa. So we gotta. But somebody just reach home and then I know what's going on. So they got to protect me. Eh? You better believe that. So just bear in mind what is taking place at this time, people. Listen to the doctors.
Just Oyewale Tomori.
Oh. See, one more, because that was a video from a couple of days ago. This next one that we're going to listen is actually very recent. This is from, I think, yesterday. So this is to put you right up to date with the very latest information.
U.S. health authorities are warning that 10 African countries are at risk from the Ebola epidemic. Officials have confirmed more cases in Uganda. Some are linked to the outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where dozens of patients are infected and several have died. The World Health Organization has raised the risk there to very high. But there may be hope on the horizon. British scientists say a vaccine for this Ebola variant could be ready for testing in the next few months.
The latest Ebola cases in Uganda include the driver of a vehicle that transported the country's first patient, a Congolese man, a health worker who treated him, and another person who had entered Uganda from the neighbouring Democratic Republic of the Congo. The World Health Organization says there are already over 80 confirmed cases in Congo and several confirmed deaths. But authorities think the real number may be much higher, with more than 700 showing potential symptoms and over 150 deaths possibly caused by the virus. The Bundibugyo strain behind the current outbreak is rare and may have been circulating unidentified for some time. It kills around a third of those infected, and unlike for the more common Zaire strain, there is currently no vaccine. It typically takes between 5 and 10 years to develop a vaccine, but scientists at the UK's Oxford University are expediting the process. They already have a so-called candidate vaccine that's almost ready for trials.
What we are doing is using the same technology that we used for the COVID vaccine to help make a vaccine against Bundibugyo. So we're going as quickly and as safely as we can. We've got some great partners globally, the Serum Institute of India, our on-site manufacturing facility, CBF. So we are getting the materials that we need to make the vaccine at scale to the Serum Institute quickly. And we're hoping, if everything goes well, that we would have a vaccine that could be tested in 2 to 3 months.
Professor Lam and her team say they hope the outbreak will be brought under control quickly without their help. Nevertheless, they're working flat out to have a vaccine ready soon to help stem the spread and prevent future outbreaks.
Issa Sterk of Doctors Without Borders gave me this update from Bunia in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the epicenter of the latest outbreak.
Yeah, so the situation is very concerning. It's now a bit longer than 1 week that the Ebola outbreak has been confirmed. So probably the transmission has been going on already for quite a while, probably weeks, maybe even months, probably. So what we see currently is that there have been already a lot of cases. Currently, every day there are new cases. There are also new deaths, and there are also new cases coming from new areas. What we also see is that at the moment there's not enough areas where patients can be isolated, not enough treatment centers. There's not enough medical staff and logistical staff on the ground. There's not enough protective material on the ground. And there's lack of diagnostic capacity. So for now, we are having a lot of suspected patients for which a sample can be taken, but then there's not enough diagnostic capacity right now to be able to confirm the diagnostics in these patients. And this is complicating a lot the situation, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, we've heard that before, of course, that the infection has been around for quite some time before it was really detected, the first cases detected. So how easy or how difficult is it to recognize that someone is infected? What are the symptoms to watch out for?
Yeah, so what is very important, so if somebody has been in contact with somebody else with the Bundibugyo virus, with Ebola disease, then that person could have been infected as well. So if somebody has a history of being in contact with somebody who was sick, severely sick, or who died, and if that person itself also will develop symptoms, then you can speak about a suspected patient who would need to have testing. Then for the Ebola disease, the symptoms always start with fever, and then people get more and more symptoms over the days. In the beginning, it can be like diarrhea, vomiting, pain in the muscles, and then part of the people will get more severe symptoms, like more severe vomiting. They will have dehydration, and some people will have bleeding and multiple organ failure.
But listen, I could have bet. I'm waiting for the I already have the antidote because it was made in a lab. I feel you. Can't fight you. I don't have any evidence of such, but I also cannot prevent you from feeling what you feel about the situation. We're gonna, you know what? Let's go to Cuba. Let's go to Cuba. But please pay attention to the Ebola situation. It's a very serious situation. Whether this thing was created in a lab, it is something generated naturally. However, it was created. The fact remains, it is a very serious disease, and I think that they say the fatality rate is 50%. So you're 50-50 when you get this.
Back in March, We Are All Fronts put out an episode saying that Cuba was next. Well, we didn't miss. Yesterday marked Cuba's Independence Day holiday, and the US wasn't going to let it pass without making a statement. They marked the occasion by handing down an indictment of 94-year-old former leader Raul Castro on charges of murder of 4 civilians from when the Cuban regime shot down 2 civilian planes back in 1996. In case the indict a foreign leader thing sounds familiar, you're not having deja vu. This was exactly what the administration did before capturing Maduro. True to form, the White House has dropped any pretense of subtlety, posting a chart of neutralized enemies with Castro's face slotted in beside Maduro and Khamenei. The island itself, meanwhile, has completely run out of fuel, and the CIA director just flew into Havana to meet with senior regime officials to boot. So, buckle up, ladies and gents. It's going to be a bit of a wild episode. 0 day. When we were last looking in on Cuba, the island was about a month into the squeeze that followed America's capture of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro back in January. Already, it was not looking great. The flow of oil from Caracas that the island had long relied on had been cut off entirely, and Mexico had backed away from sending its own shipments under US pressure. Unsurprisingly, the sudden cut to energy imports wreaked havoc on an island that is dependent on others for the majority of its oil, and the regime began to strictly ration what little it had left. Gas stations went dry and then stayed dry. What fuel did turn up climbed towards $40 a gallon, and schools either shortened their hours or closed entirely. Without fuel, the generators that kept refrigerators and water pumps running went silent, which meant food spoiled and taps stopped. Ultimately, this meant families were cooking over firewood and hoarding water in whatever brief window the grid offered them it when it flickered back on. By late April, that window was down to 3 or 4 hours on a good day. That rationing is, as of last week, over. On May the 13th, Cuban Energy Minister Vicente de la Levy went on state television to announce what everyone had known was coming. The country had run out of fuel reserves. And while that may sound dramatic, for Cubans living through all this, 0 hour more or less came and went without being noticeable. Rationing had been so intense, especially as time went on, that they were largely reduced to living in a pre-electric society. This hit some parts of the island harder than others, but nowhere was spared. By April, the blackouts were already swallowing 20-something hours of the day as the norm. Hospitals across the islands have long been running on whatever fuel their generators had left, and given that they are essentially all out, the consequences are going to start accumulating quickly. With rations...
Given that this is the situation in Cuba, has the Prime Minister yet returned and said what has happened to the students in Cuba? Are there still any St. Christopher Navy students in Cuba at this particular moment in time? Oh my God, I'm hearing that the answer is yes. I know that the Prime Minister's initial reaction, as all of his initial reactions are, we are looking into it. We will see what the situation brings. I do not know how much more we need to see. We are not condemning the action. It is an illegal blockade. It is actually an act of war. And I don't know how much worse this situation has to get before we decide, hey, I think it's time for I come home.
Of fuel come rations of care, and doctors have been prioritizing life and death cases only. At the Williams Solar Pediatric Cardio Center in Havana, the island's main children's heart hospital, doctors have resorted to rationing equipment and supplies for only those patients facing imminent death, turning the rest away. By early March, over 11,000 children were reportedly on surgical waiting lists across the country, and that number has only grown since. That means tens of thousands of parents trapped in an agonizing holding pattern, not knowing if their children will get the treatment they need to stay alive. Post-Zero Day, even those life or death operations are going to be challenging. When the generators cut out in a Cuban hospital, and they were cutting out regularly by May, there was no backup. Nurses in pitch-black wards have been squeezing ventilation bags by hand to keep patients breathing when the generators die. If they stop, the patient dies. Children having major heart surgery that cannot wait are now utterly reliant on the stamina of nurses working in stifling, miserable conditions. One slip and someone loses their little boy or girl forever. That image just about sums up what the broader healthcare system has been reduced to across the island. Nothing functions, and the result is a growing toll of deaths from conditions that a country with electricity treats without a second thought. Washington, for its part, hasn't been entirely blind to the suffering on the island. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, himself of Cuban descent, has offered $100 million in humanitarian aid, with the caveat that it would have to be handled and distributed by the Catholic Church, not the Cuban government. That has been the hang-up. After initially signaling openness to it, Havana has refused to accept distribution through anyone other than themselves. It should be noted that while this would certainly go a long way at the current moment, $100 million for an island of 10 million people in a crisis this deep is not exactly transformative. It would fall well short of what actually is needed to stabilize the country. The streets, meanwhile, are starting to boil over in a way that we really haven't seen so far during this crisis. The protests on the night of May 13th were the most widespread that the capital has seen since 2021. Demonstrations and bonfires erupted across no fewer than 12 municipalities. The regime deployed its security forces onto the streets, arrested at least 14 people, beat demonstrators, and cut the internet to keep the footage from getting out. Cuban President Diaz-Canel, for his part, took to X to address the situation, which he acknowledged was tense but chalked up to what he called a genocidal energy blockade by the United States. Whichever side of this you find more compelling, the regime there has made a name for itself, knowing how to handle exactly this kind of thing. After the 2021 protests, the last time unrest reached anything close to this scale, more than 1,400 people were arrested and hundreds sentenced to prison terms as long as 30 years, including several under the age of 18. Through a harsh crackdown, They had the whole situation under wraps in a matter of days. This time followed the same script, but in a vastly different situation with a vastly different crisis unfolding. By the next morning, a plane was on its way to Havana, suggesting Washington knew just how bad this was getting. Now, before we get into just how bad it has got, a quick word about our latest side quest. Fronts.com.
No, I've been listening to no side quest video though. Love your work, but we're not gonna listen to the side quest.
The morning after Zero Day was announced, a US Air Force jet touched down at Havana's Jose Marti International.
Lad, I'm hoping that we avoid the pandemic. I'm hoping, but it kind of feel like that's where we headed. I ain't gonna lie.
National Airport, which had been all but deserted for months, its jet fuel gone since February. Airlines had long since cut their flights. With no fuel for the trip back, there was no way to leave. By the time CIA Director John Ratcliffe stepped off the plane, he more or less had the place to himself. He met with senior Cuban officials that day, and the CIA posted a few pictures to X, captions with nothing more than Havana, Cuba. The sheer optics told the story on their own. The head of American intelligence on Cuban soil posting about it openly in a country less than 150 kilometers off the coast of Florida, or what devotees of Baroque units of measurements like to call 90 miles. If Cuba collapses in a way that Washington can't manage, the consequences don't land in some faraway theater, they wash up on the beaches of Florida. Reporting after the fact revealed a bit more of what actually went down during the visit. Ratcliffe met not with the Cuban president, who has been largely out of the equation with all diplomatic back channels since the start of the year, but rather with Raul Rodriguez Castro, known as Raulito, the grandson of former leader Raul Castro, along with the Minister of the Interior and the head of Cuban intelligence. The CIA presented a carrot and stick approach. The $100 million offer still stands, and in the meeting, Ratcliffe told them that the US was prepared to engage seriously on the economy, meaning sanctions relief and even security guarantees, but only if Cuba committed to fundamental, structural overhaul. If not, the blockade was going to remain in place. Post-Zero Day, this hits far closer to home than it may have beforehand. To understand where Washington's head is at here, you have to go back to January this year, to the capture of Nicolas Maduro in Caracas. From the American vantage point, this was just about as smooth a military operation as one can imagine. Sort of like the Iran war, but, done properly. Especially considering that they literally showed up at Venezuela's equivalent of the White House, blew in the front door, and took the president back with them. No Americans were killed, and the country's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, has proven to be surprisingly cooperative with Washington in the following months. The transition to our administration was shaped in no small part by the scars of the Bush-era Iraq War, where ripping out the whole Ba'ath state left a vacuum that took years and an entire civil war to fill. Put these together, and you arrive at the doctrine Trump is working from now. Don't tear down the entire apparatus, just find the one insider you can do business with and build the new order around them. In Cuba, that insider already has a name, and it pointedly is not Miguel Diaz-Canel. The man Washington has been quietly courting is Raulito, who has long overseen the Gaisa networks that dominate so much of the island's economy. The publicized CIA talk wasn't their first negotiation either. He's long been the person leading discussions with Secretary Rubio. The reported transition framework, nicknamed Cuba Stroika, runs entirely through his circle, around the sitting president and the party he supposedly leads. And speaking of the Castros, the Trump administration wasn't going to let an occasion like Cuban Independence Day pass without a special form of commemoration. Yesterday morning, the US Justice Department unsealed a criminal indictment of Raul Castro himself, the grandfather, who's currently 94 years old. The charges run back to February 1996, when Cuban MiG-29s shot down 2 civilian planes flown by the diaspora group Brothers to the Rescue, killing 4. Castro, who was serving as Minister of Defense at the time, and El Nuevo Herald later reported that he was on tape giving the order to shoot them down. 3 of the dead were American.
We're gonna have to actually give a little bit more context to that situation there. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but in addition to the information that he would have just given you, these flights were happening over a period of 17 months. During these 17 months, Cuba would have registered their opposition to the flights being flown over their territorial water. Of course, they are adversaries of the United States, so they would not permit flights of American planes over their airspace, as is reasonable. Just in the same example where the Americans shot down the Chinese balloon, I think a couple of years ago. You are not gonna be happy with unauthorized flights over your airspace. Nobody going for that. So as a result of that, as a result of them registering their opposition to this with the UN over all those months, then it came to the situation where they eventually shut down the plane. So just so that you have all the information, that is the full picture. And also, when you look at it in that context, then there is at least an argument that this was not illegal.
American citizens, and the fourth was a permanent resident. It was a genuine bipartisan outrage back then. Congress passed the Helms-Burton Act within days by a wide margin, which codified the embargo on the island into statute and stripped future presidents of the ability to lift it. Clinton signed it almost immediately, and it remains on the books today, which is why even Obama's normalization efforts back in 2014 were so limited. Now, nobody is seriously...
Also, to give, as I said, there is some information that is being left out here. It's a good thing I did some independent research. This act never came into force under any of the presidents. Clinton, Bush, Obama. This only came into force in 2016. Or should I say 2017. If someone tell you don't fly into their airspace and you still do, what you expect will happen? Some people just love to poke the bear. And that is what I'm saying. And especially when the person is an adversary. If you know that mere your attention, why am I going to come over in a you space, go play in a way that I know could lead to a serious confrontation? That no make no sense.
Expecting Castro the Elder to show up in court in New York. Not of his own accord, at least. There are a few different interpretations of what could be happening here. This could be a bluff, a way for the Trump administration to send a clear message to the regime in Havana that Washington means business and that they need to get moving on those negotiations. The fact that this was an indictment against Raulito's grandfather, not exactly a coincidence, is it? Then there's the domestic American situation as well. It's little secret that Rubio has his eyes on running for president. If the administration is eyeing a deal with the regime that reforms without radically overhauling the system, that is going to be a hell of a hard sell for the ultra-hardliners in Miami. This indictment, and potentially what follows, could be a way to shore up support there. Incentives aside, what matters most in the short term is whether the US actually moves on this, and as of right now, it's looking like they very well might. Late last night, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche left little to the imagination, telling reporters Castro would show up in the United States by his own will or by another way, and the White House posted its chart of 4 separate figures: Maduro, Khamenei, a recently killed ISIS leader in Africa, and Raul Castro, under the caption, neutralized. Havana seems to be taking this seriously. They've called up their militias. The civil defense issued new guidance on protection against military aggression, and Diaz-Canal has openly been talking about this being a Bay of Pigs 2.0, a reference to the botched attempt by Cuban diaspora backed by the CIA to invade and overthrow the Castro regime in 1961. According to Axios, they've also acquired roughly 300 Russian and Iranian drones, with internal discussion of targets that reportedly include the American base at Guantanamo Bay. That said, realistically, there's not a great deal that Havana can do if Washington does move in. Remember, it was Cuba's elite security forces who were protecting Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro back in January, and the score there ended up being 32-0. Should this one come to pass, it'll be much closer to America's own turf. The island's only 150 kilometers from Florida at its closest point, and if all the regime has to defend itself is 300 drones, I mean, Russia fires more than that at Ukraine pretty much every day. And while US drone interception tech is far behind that of the Ukrainians, shooting down such a small number is unlikely to make Uncle Sam break a sweat. The military question, in other words, has a pretty straightforward answer. The one that doesn't is what happens the morning after. The Cuba that comes after. For all the hardware Washington has assembled in the region, the carrier group, the indictment, the back channel, none of it solves the most basic problem of what comes next. In Venezuela, opposition parties were indeed repressed, but they were tolerated enough to survive. Hugo Chavez inherited a functioning democracy and hollowed it out from the inside, which meant the bones of an alternative were still there when his successor was captured. Cuba's history didn't work that way. Fidel Castro's revolution in 1959 burned down just about everything from the regime that came before it and built a system from scratch designed to make sure nothing outside of it could ever take root. 67 years later, nothing has. Which is exactly why Washington's talks have run not through any dissident or opposition figure, but through Raul Castro's own grandson. For all the discomfort that carries, and it carries a lot, especially for a Cuban-American exile community that has spent generations demanding the end of the Castro system, Raulito and the Gaisa apparatus he effectively controls through familial ties may be the only people on the islands with both the leverage to force a transition and the institutional weight to keep the country from falling apart during one. It is, to put it mildly, not the version of regime change that anyone who fled the revolution had in mind. All this said, the administration seems to be learning from some of the shortcomings of its approach to Iran. One of the hardest aspects of covering that conflict has been the ongoing internet blackouts in the country, with extremely minimal ability to get any information from Iranian citizens out. In Cuba, as part of the aid package being offered, Washington is also offering free Starlink access across the islands, though at the time of recording, the regime has refused to acknowledge it as being part of the offer. State media went so far as to publish a piece comparing a Starlink antenna to the installation of missile launch bases on their territory. Under Cuban law, possessing the equipment carries 3 to 8 years of jail time. The crisis on the island is only further compounded by the exodus that has been an on-again, off-again process since Castro first took power. Today, one of Cuba's legacies is the sheer number of emigrants, with an E, that it has produced. Between 2022 and 2024 alone, over 1 million Cubans, roughly 10% of the entire country, fled as conditions on the island cratered. Many of them were young, many of them educated. Just for some context, 12,000 doctors left in 1 year alone. For any country, such a brain drain is a problem enough, but on an island with just 10 million people or so, this is an all-out crisis. And that was at a time when the country suffered mere power outages, not a continuous rolling blackout. All of which suggests the numbers fleeing the island might skyrocket if things keep falling apart. A genuine collapse, security forces walking off the job, the state unable to provide even the minimum, would send a wave toward Florida that dwarfs anything since the Mariel boat lift, 150 kilometers across the water to the shores of an administration that has built its entire domestic brand on border security. Which is precisely what makes the ugly version of this, the Raulito deal, not just the path of least resistance, but the only one that Washington can actually afford. The pressure campaign Rubio has spent his career championing is, by most indications, working. The regime is out of fuel, out of friends, and visibly running out of time. What maximum pressure cannot do, however, is dictate the way a regime actually comes apart. A negotiated exit, the kind the Ratcliffe visit was designed to set in motion, does give Washington some say over what follows. A government that simply buckles under the weight, with the state ceasing to function in a matter of days, gives Washington no say at all and drops the consequences directly onto the Florida coast. The tools producing one of those outcomes are the same tools capable of producing the other, and the distance between them is a good deal narrower than anyone in Miami might like to think. Which of these possible futures Cuba actually gets is a question that will probably be answered by a few top officials and nobody else, in Havana or in Washington, is likely to get much of a say. Thank you for watching.
Okay, so that is the situation. I cannot believe that Singhis still has students in Cuba. I don't know if it's when the invasion happened is when Dr. Jogan say, you know, it's time to get our students already. And I have no idea what the premier is doing either. Although I would assume that the premier would hide behind Dr. Jones and say, but this is a federal issue. Fair enough, sir. Don't do your job. I'm gonna do the mandate of heaven now. As you know, I've tried to introduce you to some Eastern philosophy, some Eastern thoughts. I feel like there's something that we could steal from them, incorporate, and get a better society, get a better politics, get a more functioning politics. The mandate of heaven is basically what is used in China to legitimize whoever is in control. So you can just go through it, small little video. And by the way, NRP would love the mandate of heaven. CCM is not gonna be a fan of this video. If so, if you're a CCM person, maybe you may want to cut out for this little piece here. Or maybe you might learn something different, man. Get yourself exposed to something different. Look, me got a CCM blue. I'm LA. So we could do it.
Existed for thousands of years. The main reason for the existence of a state is to bring order and security to society. In order for a state to achieve these goals, it needs to exert its power over the people it governs.
I think you did start already.
The state is a human concept that has existed for thousands of years. The main reason for the existence of a state is to bring order and security to society. In order for a state to achieve these goals, it needs to exert its power over the people it governs. If a state wants to effectively exert its power to accomplish its goals, it needs stability. The legitimacy of a state is very important to its stability. There are many ways a government can be seen as legitimate by the people it governs. Medieval Europeans used the doctrine of the divine right of kings as a way to legitimize the rule of kings over the people. The emperor of the Japanese Yamato clan was the high priest of the sun goddess from whom they claimed to be descendants. The Islamic caliphs claimed descendancy from the Prophet Muhammad, and many countries today use the democratic process as a way of legitimizing politicians in power in their jurisdiction over the territory. There are also ways that a government can be seen as illegitimate by its own people, such as those that are incompetent, corrupt, or oppressive. One notable form of state legitimation is the Chinese concept of the mandate of heaven. It is notable because of its longevity and persistence throughout the history of Chinese civilization. The mandate of heaven originated in ancient China during the rise of the Western Zhou dynasty as a way to legitimize their rule over the conquered Shang dynasty. The Zhou rulers had stated that the Shang had come into power because they conquered the Xia dynasty after they had lost the mandate. They were then able to conquer the Shang after their mandate had been revoked because they were unfit to rule. The Zhou justified their rebellion and rise to power by stating that they had been given the mandate of heaven because of their virtuous conduct. The Shang had worshipped gods and other divine forces but had no concept of heaven. The mandate of heaven was created for clear propaganda use, as author Ding Zhao states, but that does not take away from its importance. Zhao writes,
"The mandate of heaven is arguably the single most important political concept that the early Zhao rulers created. By creating the mandate of heaven concept, the Zhao rulers drew their lessons from earthly, historical precedent, rather than from theological or philosophical argument. Although they preached the significance of the heavenly mandate, it was right conduct among men that they actually emphasized.
This idea keeps the emperor in check and incentivizes virtuous rule by giving the people the reason to rebel if the emperor rules poorly. This idea..."
So now we start to come to piece of the point. So you must understand, as cool as you see things are in the East, if the leaders do not lead the population in a righteous manner, if the leaders do not bring prosperity to the nation, then as a result of this, the people within the country have the right to get rid of those leaders, because essentially you would have lost the mandate of heaven. Now, where you go, you hear leaders talk about God. Who you hear talk about God more than my guy, the goat, who will tell you the voice of the people is the voice of God. And he does that because that is one of the ways that he attempts to legitimize himself by letting you know, well, it's God put me here. I'm doing God's work and the people's work and all of them kind of choppiness there, right? However, when you do things like start to build upon the hospital in the night time and not tell nobody where be your bill because you say that is gonna be a surprise. You're gonna surprise the people then with them money, with them taxpayer money, pan taxpayer land, and not tell them nothing. When you're gonna take over a decade of build a hospital, which you say is important, when you can't execute on certain things, you will end up looking to the people like you're losing the mandate of heaven. All the God you talk about. When there is a court case that suggests that Alonzo Kiati should have been at the very least investigated for actions that he took against a civilian, locking them up off the airport under the instruction of a politician, because the politician wife say that the person spy upon them, and the court say that this person should be investigated. But when you hear politicians talk about Alonzo Carti, they tell you how Alonzo Carti is one of the greatest police officers because Alonzo is willing to bend over, yeah, for his job. But when you do these things, it's not like I say, it's something that the people are blind towards. They could see, and this is why I say the people end up lose faith in the institution. You have a responsibility when you're in there. Chinese call it the mandate of heaven, but you got a responsibility to run the country in a particular way to make sure that the people step on your side. Otherwise, there come a time when the people go say, yo, I'll be done with that chubiness here. Anyway, let us continue.
Of right conduct among men isn't only found in the mandate of heaven. It is also found in the teachings of Confucius, though not all emperors had complete control over their own fate. The poor rule that gives the people reason to rebel isn't always the emperor's doing. Often the blame for climate disasters, economic problems, and other things out of the emperor's control were put on the emperor. This type of political legitimation is one of the most unique.
No, I wouldn't necessarily go to that extent. They'll talk about, well, hurricane come and earthquake come is the lead of all. Not by itself. But when you're running the country bad, and then you got hurricane come and then you see earthquake, it kind of start to feel like we getting a sign. Yeah, you're losing it. You have lost us. It happens. I'm just saying.
To develop in an ancient civilization. While many civilizations develop some sort of philosophical or theological form of legitimation for their rulers, China and its mandate of heaven focus heavily on performance legitimation. Performance legitimation is a type of state legitimation that is focused on the performance of the government, whether it is
This is the reason why I say that the NRP would more prefer the mandate of heaven. Because NRP came up with the slogan of performance matter. I would not think that anybody from NRP at the moment in time was trying to mimic the mandate of heaven necessarily. I would assume that it was a coincidence, you could say. But over in Asia, the reason why people Yes, I. But maybe not go good and all of a sudden me audio drop out and I don't know again. Huh? Me, yeah, me check. Me check me.
You're
Well,
not audio.
oh well, me no know why be me. You just click back in. All right then. All right then. Yeah, yeah, thanks. Okay, so I was saying maybe I need to rewind this little part here. Is not much you got to hear.
Developed some sort of philosophical or theological form of legitimation for their rulers. China and its mandate of heaven focus heavily on performance legitimation. Performance legitimation is a type of state legitimation that is focused on the performance of the government, whether it is economic, militaristic, or moralistic. This is
Okay. So this is where I had pause and I was saying that the reason why I felt like NRP would like the mandate of heaven. I don't think that they created the performance matters slogan by studying Chinese philosophy and figuring they would legitimize themselves through performance. However, it is something that has been used and is very effective to legitimize your government performance, doing stuff. When the counteraction to performance matters is people matter more. If you've been said that in Asia, they would look around like, what you talking about? What you talking about? People matter more than performance. Well, if you're performing, you're gonna help the people, and the people gonna be prosperous. Whether it's economically, as you say, well, we not deal with military, but morally, these institutions, when you perform, it is going to have the effects where you want. That is the ultimate level of legitimacy. You can counteract performance with, but people matter more. People matter too. You're not actually saying anything when you do those type when you say them type of circumstances that it's not moving anything in a mean nothing. So that when you see, as I say, in Asia, they're looking at it from today. Imagine well, people look at, for example, their life today, and all they are looking at is 5 years from now. Has my life improved? Have the roads gotten better? Has the opportunities gotten better? Has healthcare gotten better? Has education gotten better? You have to look at the actual performance of the government. When they gonna watch you and they gonna say, well, people matter more. What I mean? I can't tell you what I mean. It's just a thing. Less than a thing, really. But anyway, we shall continue the mandate of heaven.
Isn't something that is completely absent in other societies. Many revolutions have happened throughout history because of the poor performance of rulers, which incentivizes states to perform well, though they may not always act on that incentive. The Chinese emperor was supposed to act as a servant to the people and the state, and it was because of this mandate that he was allowed to rule.
You hear that? The Chinese emperor is a servant of the people and the state, and it is only when you got him that mandate and you maintain the prosperity of the people through performance that you could end up and continue in your job. You can say, well, 10 years ago, I can go build a hospital wing and we can't see a leg. We can't see a tie. We can't see nothing. We can have a situation where you building a building in the night and I tell people, oh, it's a surprise. How you gonna surprise taxpayers with their own money? On their own land. them think they can't work in other societies and scenarios. The mandate of heaven would be lost in them circumstances. And by the way, I'm not one of those that will tell you that the concerned citizens movement, everything they do is wrong. No, no, I'm not in that. I've consistently said when it come to capital projects, us do not know what they're doing. Not supposed to spend major money, particularly without people knowing exactly what is happening. Me no want no surprise with me taxpayer money. You have not proven, you don't have a track record what show outside the roads, and I could argue that with you too, that you are good at capital projects. Ain't good, ain't got no talent. Other things, maybe I could see it. I could argue for you with other things. I'm not here to say that everything that they do is harmful, but there are certain things that happen where you do not see service of the people. You only hear, oh, it's God put me here and the voice of the people and all kind of shit.
Its legitimation brings with it a responsibility from the emperor and the state to provide public goods to the people. They had many duties to fulfill and services to provide, even some that were not provided by other pre-modern states. Zhao writes again that the state must
maintain the functioning of the government administration and public order, lead the defense of the state in time of foreign attacks, and take responsibility for the people's welfare and associated public works.
The last few items on that list were not common among pre-modern states, but were seen as an essential part of governance by Chinese bureaucrats, statesmen, and scholars. The mandate of heaven hasn't remained the same throughout its existence. It went through a few changes in its earlier history. The most notable change came from Mencius, a follower of Confucius, which was the right to rebel against an inadequate government. Mencius was an ancient Chinese philosopher that lived during the Warring States period. He spent much of his life traveling between states and having conversations and counseling with many rulers. He believed that human nature is good and that the people are the most important to society, not the king. After the fall of the Qing dynasty, Deng Zhenjiao explains that
China experienced a series of fundamental socio-political transformations.
Many ideas and principles of the Mandate of Heaven were less important after the collapse of the final dynasty. China had broken up into warring states once again, and by 1949, Mao's communist regime had reunited all of mainland China. During Mao's reign, performance legitimation was not the main source of legitimation. Ideological legitimation was more present in Mao's China than in dynastic China. Mao propagated Marxist doctrines and used them as the foundation of his party's legitimacy because he and many others believed in Marxism. Many people also supported the Communist Party because Mao himself was very charismatic. This belief helped the Communist Party stay in power, even through all of the disasters caused by the party's poor economical management as well as the Cultural Revolution. If these events were to happen in dynastic China, there would likely have been many rebellions against the government for its poor performance. After Mao's death, the Chinese Communist Party went through some rough periods in an attempt to reform the government, which resulted in the return of performance legitimation. After the 80s and 90s, much of the ideological legitimation of the state had been replaced. The performance legitimation of the present-day CCP is similar to the Mandate of Heaven doctrine in many ways, like a focus on public works to benefit the people and the defense of the state. And in the last 2 decades, it seems like the CCP is doing well in its attempts to be seen as a legitimate and adequate government. Although the Mandate of Heaven and performance legitimation has had a large presence in Chinese civilization, it does not make the ruling government immune to a regime change, as evident by the many Chinese dynasties. The Mandate of Heaven is a very unique form of state legitimation that has had a variety of interpretations and stood the test of time. Although it isn't immune to change, it has proved to be effective and consistent throughout Chinese history. But an exclusive reliance on this form of legitimation isn't always the best way to remain legitimate and maintain stability.
Alright, that was our little stroll through. That was our little stroll through some Chinese philosophy. As I'm saying, it's not necessarily that we could take the whole thing. It's just an interesting concept I found, where you could see that performance is one of the things that should be important. You can counteract that and tell me, well, people matter more, and can tell me why be mean. How would that work? No, we're gonna get into some politics. This is not. I don't have any videos concerning any of the parties in the Caribbean or anything like that. We are actually gonna be looking at some Canadian politics. We're gonna be looking at some UK politics. Uh, I would have been talking about coalition governments, and we're gonna speak more about minority governments, how they are formed, as well as majority governments. And we also hopefully gonna get into some videos concerning the constituency boundaries commission and what I feel like is some craziness that is taking place. So let me see. Let me get this one here first. General election, is this what I want? Let me see. I think this is what I want.
It's the day after the election. The votes have been cast, the people have spoken. But how do we go from here to here? Well, it all starts with a magic number, 326. That's half the seats in the House of Commons plus one. And it's the number all parties dream of because it means they have an overall majority in Parliament. Quick sidebar, in practice, it's a little bit less than that because some MPs never vote. The Speaker, yep, that's the guy, and his deputies don't. And over in Northern Ireland, any MPs from the pro-Irish...
Obviously, these numbers will be different in the Caribbean. These numbers will be different in the Caribbean. Well, particularly in St. Kitts and Nevis, the numbers that we're paying attention to are 3 in Nevis and 6 in in the federal election. But as I said, we're just using this to get concepts from this to understand how these things.
Unification Party Sinn Féin stay away because they don't recognise the authority of Parliament. Anyway, let's just stick with 326. If a party managed to get that or more MPs, things are pretty straightforward. It means they get to form a majority government. The leader of that party can jump in a car, go straight to Buckingham Palace and ask the Queen for permission to form a government. Though an outgoing Prime Minister, if it's a different person, actually has to make the same journey first to resign. Anyway, having an...
I don't necessarily know that we have the situation where the person who is leaving office goes to Parliament to resign. I don't think we have that equal thing. It would be nice. It would be more formal, but I don't necessarily think we have that. I think you're just out on your ass.
Absolute majority of MPs in the Commons usually means the governing party has enough support to pass laws and get things done. That's why parties have whips, basically people who try to convince MPs to vote in line with their own party. But even the whips weren't able to stop loads of MPs rebelling over Brexit. So the bigger a party's majority, the more headroom they have to deal with those rebellious MPs. But what if no party...
We also do not have this concept of whips, but this goes to show you, as I have been saying, just because you're on the Labour Party in the United Kingdom ain't mean that you're necessarily going to vote with the Labour Party. I cannot believe that some of these politicians do not have a mind of their own. You cannot vote with conscience for your party if what you are going to vote for is going to hurt your constituency. For example, you're voting against yourself. This is why there's a recognition that there are individuals in the parliament, even though we are a party, everybody got to go say for this thing to actually work and be a feasible situation. You cannot have a situation where you simply blindly anything your party say Yes, I'm with that. Doesn't work. And so that's why they have the whip situation. I know that they have it also in the American Senate, senatorial. Well, yeah, in the Senate and in the House as well. There are whips.
Reaches the magic number of 326 on election day. That's when we get what is called a hung parliament. Admittedly, this used to be quite rare, but it has happened in 2 of the last 3 elections, so really all bets are off.
This hung parliament situation, the reason why I have been introducing these topics about coalition government, about minority government, etc., is because if you look at the history of St. Christopher and Nevis, we have had this situation multiple times. We definitely had it in 1983. It was the reason why TAM and NRP actually got into office in 1980. It happened in 2015 and also in 2020. So we kind of paying attention. It actually is a common thing, and we are set up. Some vote for donors as opposed to constituents. Yeah, and Mr. Gaskell, you see, that's another thing. But there must be some way to actually represent the people who voted for you. But anyway, the hung parliament situation, and as I foresee, I'm not necessarily seeing strength in the Labour Party at this time, and you can't tell me you see strength in a PAM. No party from Nevis could do it, and Timothy Harris also is not strong in my opinion. So the likelihood that we will come into the hung parliament situation is one of the reasons why I'm emphasizing and showing these circumstances, because we tend to just it tends to just happen, and I don't think we never necessarily have a handle on it.
A hung parliament is a real headache, mainly because it means parties might actually have to cooperate to get into or hold on to power. So here are 2 options on how a government is formed in the event of a hung parliament. Option 1. 2 parties or more with a combined majority of 326 MPs or more get together to form a coalition government. They will decide behind closed doors who will be given the most important roles and what policies they might compromise on. That's what happened in 2010, and just look at how happy everyone seemed to be back then. Pros.
So we are very familiar with the coalition government. We just had one. Didn't end in the best manner. So this is option 1 for how you can form a government if there is a hung parliament coalition. And I guess you're going to be speaking about the pros and cons here.
You have a combined majority to actually govern with. Cons. Parties have to compromise and might alienate some of their supporters. Option 2. The party with the most seats tries to form a minority government. So they don't have a majority in the Commons, but they govern anyway. In order to pass laws, the government asks for occasional support from another.
I want to focus on the minority government aspect as well. I know that Denzel Douglas was up in arms in 2000. Well, no, it wasn't 2000. It was 1993. I could incite actually minority government co-op. It's not this kind of thing that it is illegal and all this type of situation as Labour might express. It does mean, however, that you will have to work with the opposition to pass laws. You can't even pass a budget without somebody on the opposition voting for you. So it is a potential scenario where it is more representative, because as the opposition, you will actually have a say in how what laws are made, in the passing of the budget and all these type of things. So it is a situation we should be aware of. It's more common in other parts of the world, but we shouldn't be fooled and asked to incite and do any kind of stupidness because the politicians are unable to convince the other parliamentarians to support them. If you can't support them, then you have to move to other mechanisms.
The party. That party might agree to back the government on the most important votes, and in exchange, the government guarantees them influence over things they care about. In 2017, then Prime Minister Theresa May didn't form a coalition, but had an arrangement with the DUP in Northern Ireland that meant she could mostly count on their votes. This is called a confidence and supply agreement. The pros, there's a government. The cons, it can be difficult for that government to actually get things done.
So there are the possibilities of doing formal agreements, and an example of a formal agreement would be the Charlestown Accord. But there is also informal agreements that are made. So, for example, we still have not seen the agreement that stated that the politicians would support Timothy Harris for 2 terms. We have not seen that. We don't know if it's if it's a verbal agreement, a written agreement. That's something that they got together behind closed doors and decided that the public don't need to see this. And we just haven't gotten it.
Confused yet? No? Then I'll add a little bit more complexity. Keep in mind that the UK has no written constitution, so much of how the government is formed is based on convention, and there can be exceptions to how things are done. In the 1923 election, this guy formed the first Labour government with the support from another party, even though the Conservatives had won the most seats overall. So what can we take away from this? The party with the most MPs in Parliament usually gets to form a government. But the closer the election results, the more complicated things can get.
Okay, I also have an additional video, very short video. As I said, we're going to Canada this time. It's a small little explainer. And part of this is also to show you. Remember, we got our system from Canada, may I say from Canada, from the United Kingdom. And so if you study most Commonwealth countries, you could see the Westminster system.
Pop quiz. What's 343 divided by 2? Now, let's round that number up to 172, and you've got the magical number that federal party leaders are all chasing in this election. That's because this is the first federal election with 343 ridings. And that 172, that's the number a party needs to win to form a majority in Parliament. You can think of those electoral seats as literal chairs, and you're going to see 343 of these chairs in the House of Commons after this election, one for each riding across the country. So parties nominate candidates to run in these ridings, and Canadians place their vote for the preferred candidate, and the candidate with the most number of votes becomes the Member of Parliament. When it's all said and done, the party with the most MPs forms government, and that party leader becomes Prime Minister. Now, the party that has 172 or more MPs will have a majority mandate. That means they'll control more than 50% of the seats in the House of Commons. You might sometimes hear that as holding the confidence of the House. And there are perks to this. Majority governments tend to pass their legislation faster because there's fewer MPs to vote against their bills. Majority governments tend to be more stable, with the party in power staying in power before an election has to be called every 4 years. Now, what happens if a party still wins the most number of seats but falls short of 172? Well, they still get to govern the country, their party leader becomes the prime minister, but they're running what we call a minority government. So, since they don't have over 50% of the seats in the House of
One thing I want to add here, I don't think it was said in the last video either, but it is definitely, you could find this information. When you are going to form a minority government also, preference is given to the incumbent. In 1993, the preference should have been given to Kennedy Simmons to first form a minority government if he can. So the way that it played out was not incorrect. If we have a hung parliament at the next session, the preference should be given to Dr. Drew to form a minority government first. because he is the incumbent prime minister. So that's how that works.
Commons, minority governments tend to work with other parties to pass their legislation. Or they might strike something more formal, like a coalition government or a supply and confidence agreement. Coalitions are when two or more parties agree to run the government together. There's also a cabinet with different ministers from each party. They're responsible for different portfolios like defense, finance, or immigration. Canada has only seen one coalition government on the federal level. That was back in 1917 with the Union government. It was a team-up with Sir Robert Borden's Conservatives and a handful of Liberal MPs. As for examples of supply and confidence agreements, you only need to turn the clock back to 2022. That's when Justin Trudeau's Liberals were in power with a minority government. In March of that year, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh signed an agreement with Trudeau. He promised NDP confidence votes in exchange for priorities like national pharmacare and dental care. So let's flash forward to now, where Canadians have a couple more weeks before casting their ballot. But whether it'll be a majority government or a minority government, that's still up in the air. What else would you like to know about the election? Send your questions to ask@cbc.ca.
Okay. This next video, I think this is gonna be our last video. I have some AI videos, but maybe I can save those for next week. So this next video is about the constituency boundaries commission. Yes, the constituency boundaries commission. I was putting the boundaries first. I had a back and forth with my premier, the GOAT, last year, in which the premier really feel like I am unfair to him. He feel like I want to speak wonderful things about the NRP and say nothing good about the CCM, etc., etc. So he would have been saying, NRP does break the law. And I said, Mr. Premier, you need to calm down because you break the Constitution every single day. There is not one single day that you don't break the Constitution. And he would have responded, well, show me first how you go. I said, all right, Mr. Premier. I said, you have been a parliamentarian for 20 years, sir. You have been on the boundaries, on the Constituency Boundaries Commission. I have never seen a report of the Constituency Boundaries Commission. In failing to do your job under the Constitution, you break the law. You are breaking your oath to the people. And when I explained that to the premier, he came off the high horse and he stopped saying that I have to prove anything, and he was like, "Okay, Alan, okay." That is his way of saying I am defeated. Why you not much show him? Then you shouldn't be that leadership position at all, man. You have listen. I like to help people who need the help, you know. And sometimes my premier need the help. So of course, I offer him assistance all the time. He definitely does need it. So I have, because I have been looking at this boundaries thing, I thought I should bring it to the people. And I've actually done a little bit of research over the weekend. I want to tell you that I was shocked with some of the things that I would have seen. For example, I did not know that during the very first local election in Nevis after independence, that the biggest constituency in Nevis was St. George's, more affectionately known as Gingerland Country. I had no idea that Gingerland was the biggest constituency once upon a time. Now that is no longer the case. As a matter of fact, as of the last election, Gingerland is now the smallest constituency. I would have also, it was pointed out to me that the reason why St. George was given a federal seat by itself was because of the fact that it was the biggest constituency in Nevis. And I'm not talking biggest from an area perspective. I'm talking about they had the most voters in St. George's. I was shocked. This was the case all through the 90s. I think it did first change in according to my notes here. It would have first changed in 1992 that St. John's would have eclipsed St. George as far as registered voters. So it was kind of unique. Now, what? And here is me now helping my premier again. What is supposed to happen with the boundaries is that the constituencies are supposed to reflect the census and the amount of people allocated in them at the time. I heard they are moving names out of constituency into St. James to ensure Zouk in the coming elections because they think Eric is quite safe. Well, we're going to see about that. And by the way, St. James has been growing steadily. I think St. James is now solidly the second biggest constituency out there. Yeah, definitely. That's what I'm seeing here. And it has been for the past for the past three elections, St. James has grown to be the second biggest constituency. My overall point, however, with regards to the federal elections, is that St. John's now, when you put St. John's and St. Paul's together, you have the second biggest constituency in the federation. It is a 7,000 man constituency. And then when you look at St. George does not have 2,000 people. I say you took off since today is a holiday, but I mean, I take off no time, boy. I step on this thing. I love this thing, you know. So when you look, as I say, constituency, what we call number 9 at this moment in time, has 7,000 people. Constituency number 10 does not have 2,000. And then you come to St. Thomas's. And St. James, number 11, and that has over 4,000 people. If we did a simple reshuffle and we put St. George and St. James as a constituency, if St. John's take a rightful place, St. John's is now the biggest one. St. John's is the one that should be by itself at this moment in time. That would also have 4,000 people, 4,600. And then if you put St. Paul's and St. Thomas's, every constituency in Nevis, all three of them now would have at least 4,000 constituents. It would be even across the board. And you would be fulfilling what is the duty given to parliamentarians, to persons who are on the Constituency Boundaries Commission, because that is the whole goal. You're not supposed to have these lopsided constituencies. So if the Premier was actually interested in doing his job, he would not just say that he has this massive constituency, but there should be a recommendation that of exactly what I said. It would smooth out everything. St. George, this is not no knock on you. You show me that you were the biggest constituency. That was in the 80s. We're in the 2020s now. And that cannot substantiate itself. So we're going to look at this video here now about boundary madness in the UK.
Welcome to Show Don't Tell. Today we're going to talk about the broken foundation of British democracy, boundary changes in the United Kingdom, After 12 years of refusing to update election boundaries, the current parliamentary constituencies are based on 18-year-old data, which will
we ain't gone too far into the thing, but you hear the broken foundation. Our leaders like to tell us we are a thriving democracy. The constituencies and the boundaries are the foundation of the system. If the foundation crack, how you gonna tell me that we got this thriving democracy? You're not fool me with that. Also of note is the fact that he's saying that the UK is in an issue, well, has an issue because they are operating off of data that was last synthesized, that was last put together 18 years ago. Well, you need to understand that we operate in half a data that was last synthesized. In the 80s, we not had no change since the 80s. Let me slip from that into this. This also shows how disingenuous the Labour Party is. Denzel Douglas, the last time he was the Prime Minister, attempted to change some boundaries. It was found that the change was not lawful. Labour Party has come back into power again, and you do not hear a peep about changing boundaries. You don't see no kind of movement on the subject. You don't see Denzel Douglas have the same fire that he had in 2015. And by the way, the issue that they lose the case on was the fact that it was not properly gazetted. The people didn't know. That's why I could say they tried to slip it past and it didn't work. You get Unity went in, they win the case, they walk out. We not got to bother with that. We don't need that. Labour come back in, and you ain't hearing anything about constituency boundaries commission. It is a constitutional body that needs to be doing its work in order for the democracy to be working in the way that it should. Anyway, back to the video.
Be 22 years out of date at the next election. Want to understand how the British Parliament has failed the most basic aspects of democracy? Stay tuned.
Listen, I love the word this guy is using. Has failed one of the most basic aspects of democracy. And this is what this is why when I told the Premier, Mr. Premier, you just break the law every single day. You have failed the people because you don't do anything with regards to this aspect. You only go on the radio and you talk and you say, bye, the constituency are too big. Well, please. Don't tell me people matter more. Perform now. Pana.
Ever since the rotten boroughs were abolished in 1832, we have had boundary reviews in order that constituencies reflect changes in the number of registered voters. However, the last implemented boundary review was in 2006. The 2013 review was killed by Parliament before it could even report, and although the subsequent 2018 boundary review made it to completion, it's trapped in purgatory as the government declines to bring the vote to implement the new updated boundaries because
there is much doubt as to whether the bill will pass when it's brought forward.
There is some question as to whether Parliament will actually carry through the present boundary reviews.
So what is the current state of affairs? Well, today's English boundaries are based on the election rolls of the 17th of February 2000, and in the 18 years since there have not been any further revisions. Parliamentary reluctance.
If we had the Boundaries Commission was here last year, Labour didn't like the new boundary proposal, so they held off calling a snap election. Well, Mr. Gaskell, are you aware of any actual report? Because I wouldn't necessarily, I cannot substantiate whether or not they have sent people into the communities. What I am asking for is the Constitution actually says that they are supposed to make a report, I think, roughly every 5 years, they're supposed to make some kind of report. So it's not even like I'm asking for exhaustive work here. I'm just asking for something. And if we had one in 2000, at least a report, that would have been way better. England doing better than us.
Stems from the 2011 Parliamentary Voting System and Constituencies Act, which changed many rules of the boundary changes, of which these two are by far the most contentious. I'll also highlight this rule because I'm going to use data exclusively from English constituencies, excluding the Isle of Wight, because it eliminates outlier constituency sizes, and these are comparable back to the year 2000, though the issues I'm talking about in this video are broadly true for the regions too. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about the 2011 changes and other issues that have put boundary reviews on hold for over a decade, with show don't tell about each claim. Boundary reviews are inevitably more politicised than other topics I've covered, and I'll give my views, but as ever, the sources are in the description below. To highlight how discriminatory the current boundaries are, we'll begin with the requirement.
Before they continue, I would also say this is not no complicated thing like where they would say if you have to amend the constitution. This is something that is done between opposition members of parliament and people who in power. That's it. This ain't supposed to be no complicated thing. This ain't need no this does not need the people to assent for there to be action on this. This is about the political will or lack thereof of our current representatives, and why we go get some fresh blood. We go get parliamentarians who know their job and who actually they don't just go and swear the oath, but they intend to carry through with the roles, responsibilities, and duties that they are given. Because if the check no come, if the check bounce, it gonna be a problem. We want 'em to the people. Want 'em to the responsibility that you got to the people.
Meant that all constituencies be within 5% of the average size. Today's distribution of constituency sizes in England is ridiculous. The largest English constituencies have over 90,000 voters, the smallest constituencies just 53,000. This top decile contains 4.5 million voters with 53 MPs. The bottom decile just 3.2 million voters, also entitled to 53 MPs. 1.3 million more voters, absolutely zero additional representation. And to stress what I said before, this is all within mainland England, one constituent nation, no special deals, no protected constituencies. This is just how broken the boundary situation has become. Before 2011, reviews prioritised local government boundaries over equality, so even at the outset of the previous boundary review, they ranged from 14% above average to 20% below average. 18 unchanged constituency years later, today's range is 24% above average to 29% below, meaning some citizens have almost twice the representation of others. The new rules replaced all of this with...
Now, with regards to this aspect, we do not have this 5% rule. As I'm saying, the general concept is we are supposed to do the best we can to make sure that the constituencies are even. Of course, we use the established boundaries as far as parish boundaries, but there is even flexibility in that. Let me give you an example. It is foolishness currently to say that if you live on that side of Quadricordia, you live at town. And you live on the other side of Quadricord, you live at St. Thomas, at Chopiness. There could be some flexibility wherein we could say, nah, them people are town people. We can. is just as simple as putting it in a report, making a recommendation, making logical arguments, having the political will, and following through. That's all it takes.
Mathematical equality, all constituencies within 5% of the average, sharply reducing the flexibility of boundary reviews and the significance of existing boundaries. So why is this contentious? Well, MPs naturally feel attached to their constituencies, although this often veers into voters being described as animals rather than human beings. Boundary changes,
leaving them isolated from their natural home,
even veering into taboo, as they would
force unnatural alliances,
or even greater rhetorical flights, boundary reviews akin to the construction of the Berlin Wall or outright invasion.
The boundary review proposals brutally cut into the town at the heart of my constituency, namely Port Talbot. The high street was cut off from the main shopping centre, and the steelworks were cut off from the sandfields.
But personally, I welcome the new rule. Equal representation is the foundation of democracy. Local ward and borough boundaries are just as arbitrary as parliamentary ones, and despite MPs' imaginings, neither represent the huge variety of real communities.
We actually asked people in the British election study to draw their local communities, and with a map, with Google Maps. And we've written a paper, myself and colleagues, looking at those maps. They don't overlap constituencies, and there's enormous variation in the maps that people draw. And if you go and ask people how strongly they identify with that local community, only about 10% will say they strongly identify. And if you go and ask people, and we ask people also what were they thinking of, the vast majority said they're thinking of their neighbourhood, and only a small fraction said the people and places they think of when they vote.
So overall, there isn't really much evidence to support the idea that preserving local authority boundaries has much merit compared to equality, and quite frankly, it was exactly this desire to maintain boundaries regardless of population that created the rotten boroughs in the first place. So let's move on to the second and even more contentious.
So, point number one. If you are not gonna adhere to the rule that, and as I'm saying, that specific one they don't apply. But if you are not gonna even try to make sure that these things are equal, then you're gonna have situations where the smallest constituency in Nevis, St. George, is by itself. That cannot apply to 2026 mathematics, to the realities of 2026. Can be. St. John's deserves to be by itself. And we could equal it out by putting St. George and St. James, the two different countries, together, and put St. Paul's and St. Thomas's together. This is an easy fix.
Just change, reducing the number of MPs from 650 to 600. We have to begin with the fact that at 650 MPs, the UK has one of the largest lower houses of parliament in the world, being beaten only by China, North Korea and Germany. The UK has one of the largest governments in the world. 78 MPs act as ministers, and 139 MPs bask on the payroll vote. And of course, we can't ignore that bustling first-class dining carriage aboard the gravy train, 792 lords, wallowing together in our parliamentary trough, no less than 1,442 legislators, second only to China's 2,980, and over 50% larger than third place Italy. The whole situation is an embarrassment. So what do MPs think about this?
And I would argue, actually, that we desperately need the more MPs rather than reducing to 650.
So it's all based on glorious circular reasoning. There's so many government ministers, so we have to have so many MPs, and we have to have so many MPs because there's so many members of the House of Lords, and so on into eternity. But the effect of reducing 650 MPs to 600 doesn't produce a catastrophic change on ministers or the payroll vote or the House of Lords. You can see from the comparison that the Commons ministers increased by 1% of all MPs and roughly twice those numbers for the majority party, Similarly, 21% payroll vote goes to 23%, and the House of Lords is so huge it makes no difference either way. Some MPs also claim they wouldn't be able to support the workload with fewer MPs, an argument unlikely to be appreciated by those 100 MPs who already operate with more constituents than the proposed maximum size. Now let's turn to wider issues and the electoral register itself. The boundary review submitted in 2018 was based on the December 2015 election rolls, but the Brexit referendum of 2016 created a large increase in registrations. In England, the register grew by 1.3 million people. So using the 2015 roll as the foundation of the boundary review means those 1.3 million people are not recognised. It sounds like a significant error. However, in a boundary review, what we are concerned about is the distribution of voters to calculate the 600 seats. So increases only impact if spread unevenly across the country. If evenly spread, then the increases cancel out. If we look again at the graph of constituency sizes and separate out the increase that occurred between 2015 and 2017, we can see that the increase is quite broad across constituencies and in fact also across political parties. Matt Singh of Number Crunching Politics also analysed the data and said, the changes fall within a remarkably tight range. In 89% of local authorities, the increase in registration is within plus or minus 3 percentage points of the England and Wales average, concluding the data does not support the suggestion that using later versions of the register would materially alter the distribution of seats. And contrary to arguments that the Boundary Commission was bound by law to use the 2015 data, they state themselves in the 2018 review, we have not taken the view that we are obliged to shut our eyes entirely to growth or decline that has occurred since the start of the review. We have therefore been prepared to take into consideration such proven changes. And to me, that last phrase, such proven changes, is the final confirmation. What we're concerned about is that we make an accurate electoral map, and if there's no difference between using the 2015 and 2017 registers, then it's simply a delaying tactic to demand a rerun of the process if we know it will create the same outcome.
I just want to say something about the register in Nevis at this time. I don't have the federal election vote spreads, but I have the local. Right now, currently, I think the premier said the population of Nevis is 15,000, approaching a high for Nevis, 15,000. Do you know that the allocated voters for the 2022 election was 13,308 people? 13,000 out of the 15,000. Listen, even if you want to say that 3,000 people don't live in a Nevis, that would still be 13,000 out of 18,000 people on the register. You know? Now, I am not going to blame the parties in power solely for what is going on with the register. I think that every party, and also you could have individual people. If you see a name on the list, you could go and object to the name. No? Now, of course, you could tell a party that you may be affiliated with, but if it bother you that somebody on the list, dead people or something, you can get them off the list. If you don't believe me, call me and I tell you the procedure, and you get through. It's not this difficult thing. You're not supposed to stop there and say, well, you will get cheated off. Another observation, between 2017 and 2022, 2,000 voters were added to the voters list. And at the same time, even though there are 13,000 people on the voters list, less people voted in the 2022 election than were voted in the 2013 election. 2013 election was the highest voter turnout in Nevis history. nearly 75% of the population. From since that time, these last two elections, people basically haven't been voting. These last two elections have been the poorest attended when you're talking about percentage of votes cast. Both of them in the 50s. And every election outside of those elections has been in the 60s. As a matter of fact, in 2017, when the premier would have won, 3 constituencies saw less persons vote than who would have voted in the last election, and overall it was 1,000 less people voted in that election. As I said, the number increased in 2022, still ain't reached back to 2013 heights, even though it's 3,000 more people on the roll.
I've yet to see any analysis that there would be a difference between using the two rolls, and it seems the Boundary Commission came to the same conclusion. Now let's turn to the next issue, that the boundary review will likely result in more seats for the party that wrote the new rules. Therefore, the review is accused of gerrymandering. It's worth stating unequivocally that the boundary commissions themselves are independent, led by a High Court judge and staffed by civil servants hosting rounds of proposals and public hearings. So why do we have this claim that the review favours a political party?
This once again is not the same in St. Christopher, but as I said, there is significant work that has to you have to ask the leader of the opposition. Some people from the opposition are on the commission, and it is a bipartisan situation. So it's both. Everybody got to come up with this report. It's not like I say you're gonna be in power and you're gonna shove it down my throat. And it is also supposed to be an opportunity to be better. To not say that everything that your colleague or counterpart is doing is awful. But to actually work together and say, yeah, certain things got to be for Nevis. Well, think it's a Nevis. Certain things got to be bigger. You can't just tell me country above self and can't actually enforce it at the moment in time when it is really required.
Let's change our original chart of constituency sizes into arbitrary colours of grey and black for the two main parties. Even a glance at the chart shows black bars clustered to the right and grey bars clustered to the left, and indeed the averages reflect this. So the accusation of gerrymandering stems 100% from the idea that constituencies should be equally sized. There's nothing else to it. The new rules produce more black seats because they have larger constituencies which will be split, whereas the Grey Party has smaller constituencies which will be consolidated. To my mind, arguing against equality because historically you've been privileged and you'll be worse off when citizens are treated equally is not summiting the moral high ground, and frankly saying it was politicians setting the terms of the review doesn't even speak highly of how much respect you have for the idea of equality. And it's worth reiterating the inequality in this diagram, and I believe every political party should defend equal representation and its fundamental basis of democracy. As the saying goes, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. Having had a system which permitted undersized constituencies in their favour, it's not surprising the Grey Party views equality as oppressive. If the Grey Party wanted to be smart about it, they wouldn't be questioning equality itself. Rather, we should all be asking the question, what is it that we should be making equal? And with that, we turn to the final and very interesting argument about the system itself. The UK does not use population, that is, all people, including children and adults not eligible to vote, for the purpose of quantifying boundaries. Instead, in the UK, we use the electoral roll. Contrary to myth, this was not a recent change, it's been this way since 1944. Why we do so seems unclear. In my quick Wikipedia survey, Canada, the United States, Ireland and Australia all use population, usually from the census itself, a far more accurate system, rather than registered voters, so it doesn't appear the UK has the support of international convention. Breaking down constituencies by population rather than registered voters reveals two very interesting things. Firstly, the skew on population is far greater than on registered voters. The largest constituency population is an incredible 185,000 people. The range of constituency populations in England varies from the mean by 78% above to 33% below. To understand why there is such a difference, let's break the population down into three groups: registered voters, under 18s, and other adults being people who either have not or cannot register to vote. You can see how much impact taking this into account has. If we look at that smallest constituency with just 53,000 voters, it's actually average on population because there are 25,000 adults not on the electoral register. And secondly, let's break it down again by political party. And now you can see the tables have turned. The Grey Party is now biased towards the right, and on average they actually have larger populations in their constituencies than the Black Party. I'm talking about this population point in some detail because it still surprises me how much difference it makes. Although there may be 4,000 fewer voters on average in a Grey constituency, it's equally true that there are 3,000 more human beings, and in some constituencies, less than half the population is on the electoral roll. I feel the Grey Party have missed a trick here. If they'd spent more time campaigning and building support for a population-based system, they could have made a public consensus for change in their favour, and overall I feel the time might be right to have a debate on whether we should actually be using population. So what happens next? Well, the government has to bring the now submitted 2018 review to a vote in the Commons and the Lords, where it can only be accepted or rejected, not modified in any way. The boundary review was submitted in September 2018, but the government has so far declined to bring it to a vote, possibly because there's something else taking up their time, but as I mentioned earlier, there is a great deal of scepticism about whether they have the votes to pass it, and the government may simply decline to ever try and redress inequity in current boundaries. There is another option sitting on the table, a private member's bill which has passed second reading and proposes 650 MPs, a 7.5% tolerance on constituencies, and throwing out the latest boundary review and starting all over again. It's also speculated that if the current boundary review fails, then the government may well support this bill. With the convenience of no job cuts and deferring a boundary review to beyond the next election, I suspect it's likely to succeed if allowed to be presented to the House. I feel in the UK we're simultaneously blessed by one of the best boundary review processes with independent commissions and public hearings, and cursed by one of the most self-interested groups of politicians in the world, who have built an unassailable paper castle at which they are determined to keep us locked out of. And that brings us to the end of today's long episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Feel free to like, subscribe, or just watch some of my other videos, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, I will end with the rule for the constituency. First one is that there will be there shall be not less than 8 constituencies in the island of St. Christopher and not less than 3 in the island of Nevis. And if the number of constituencies is increased beyond 11, then at least 1/3 of those are supposed to be from Nevis. The second one is that our constituency shall contain as nearly equal numbers of inhabitants as it appears to the Constituency Boundaries Commission to be reasonably practicable, but the Commission may depart from this rule to such extent as it considers expedient to take account of the following factors. So they must say that it generally supposed to be equal, except except if you're gonna the only departure would have to be from one of the following reasons. The requirements of Rule 1 and the differences in the density of the population in the respective islands of St. Christopher and Nevis. Rule 1 is the first one where I just read, so we're not really concerned about that part there. But the density, none of that gone against what I said with regards to put St. James and St. George together. They need to ensure adequate representation of sparsely populated areas. All of that comes into play. It equals out everything. The means of communication, my God, it's 2026. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Geographical features. If you do not believe that St. James and St. George share geographical features, look at the drag race what just happened there, and you talk to me. And the last one is existing administrative boundaries. So none of this has changed anything that I said. No, it is for the persons in authority to do their work. And furthermore, in case anybody don't know this, Nevis by itself, independent of St. Christopher, of the federal parliament, this is not something that you could hide behind. Nevis is also supposed to have its own boundaries commission. Do you have an opinion regarding what is happening with the voting rights in the US, with black people's rights? Well, I think that you're specifically speaking in the South. There is, as far as I understand, there is a push to gerrymander. I think this is specifically in Tennessee and maybe one or a couple other places, but it's just an attempt to neutralize the vote of black people, and to ensure that those seats remain in the hands of a particular party. It is a difficult thing. I hope that it does not work, but that is a unique situation. It is not exactly equal to what goes on in the Caribbean. I would say that I think that there needs to be some kind of mature politician who comes into power in the United States who ends this situation once and for all. I think that all politicians overall should have a responsibility to try to make sure that the people thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. You don't know how much I appreciate it, man. But yeah, it is a situation where I think that a politician who is mature enough gonna have to come in and make a call and to end some of the partisan rules. There should not be any gerrymandering. It should be clear how these things operate so that you don't have these situations arising. As I say, you need some maturity. You need a new perspective. You can't leave things with the same old perspective, and so that's why I just try to give you all different things to think about, different ways to argue. As I say, a new perspective. Tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow is the topics. The Honorable Mark Brantley, my goat, will be on tomorrow with the guys, Yasan and Banky. Tune into the show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps the algorithm. You push us in front of other people and give us other opportunities. I would thank you again. For those of you who are in the United States, continue to enjoy your Memorial Day holiday. And for those of you who are in the Commonwealth, continue to enjoy your Whit Monday. I will see you all again next week. and we shall be in the month of June. So I take care of yourself, and later.
Bling bling, now me call it King Kong. Every song I write, hit song. Every song I write, hit song. Tell me something, am I wrong? To believe in myself, put nobody above myself. Energy, energy, build your energy. Love, charity, what a sight to see, what a sight to see. What a colossal, working and working to prosper. What you gonna stop for? Keep on this right on the corner. Hey, make way when I'm weird there. Hey, tell the ears that them stay there. Hey, that is your destiny. Maybe what you ought to be. Even if no one you reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no one you reach nowhere. So you have to find a way. Them no one to see you fly. Them no one to see you touch sky. Them no one to see you fly. Hey. Them no one to see you fly. Them no one to see you touch sky. Them no one to see you fly. Reach nowhere, so you have to